Hello, everybody. How are you? I wonder if this works. It's wonderful to connect to everybody. And this is actually the first time I've done one of these mega streams out from my studio alone for a while. I usually do these events in collaboration with a lot of high school students. At least I've been doing that for a while. But today I'm doing it solo. So I'd just like to check to see if the equipment works. If you're able to hear me, please type something into the chat. And as you do, you'll probably notice that the system I'm using here actually displays the chat on the screen. This makes for a more lively discussion. That's why I do it this way. So if you are able to hear, please say something into the chat so that I can see it, please. Oh, good. I see that there are some yeses. That's fantastic. Okay, so that means that it's working in this main Zoom room. If you're tuning in right now over YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn Live, if you would like to join the chat, I've actually put the link to the Zoom meeting inside all of those posts. You're welcome to just join into that. Or there's also a link to live.poshenloh.com/show where you're able to see this and participate in the chat right then and there as well. So that way, hopefully, anybody who's watching is able to join in. Now, with all of these kinds of events, I've learned from experience that if it says event starts at 8, that's not always when everyone comes in. So I'll use the first few minutes to just understand a little bit about this audience. So first of all, the title of the talk was to help people become math team coaches. So I'm going to make the assumption that most people here are adults, not actual students. If you are a student, please feel free to comment in. Maybe you're just trying to watch this for entertainment. But if you happen to be a parent or an adult or a coach, if you don't mind typing into the chat what grade levels your kids are in, that would be very helpful because then that helps me to understand who I'm talking to. Aha, I see things coming in already. Great. So I'm seeing an interesting mix. Most of the numbers which are coming in are middle school, but I'm also seeing a few elementary school, and I'm seeing a few high school as well. So I'll try to make this session as useful to everyone as possible. Now, I think that the age that oftentimes is one that most people focus on is actually middle school, because that is actually a very interesting age. That's the age when kids start thinking for themselves too, about what they might want to do. And that's also the best age to bring a lot of people together. I will start this talk really starting to go through all the material at about 5 minutes after the hour, only because there happen to be people who are still coming in. I can see that's happening with our main room right here. But in the meantime, I see, oh, wow, neat. So Nate says, student interested in teaching. Congratulations. Love that. That's always very important too. The next question I have is, do your schools already have these kinds of math teams which have about 2.5 hours of math practice per week? This is also useful for me to know. So I guess that's letting me know a bit more about the audience. And I'm talking about 2.5 hours. I'm not talking about something where they might do the practice for about half an hour once a week. I'm looking for the 2.5 hour type thing. And I'm seeing interesting answers coming in here. Schools are lacking funding. I see a lot of no's. I guess that's why you're here at tonight's event. But I also want to make another comment about the lacking of funding. It is actually very sad that schools lack funding. Actually, there's another thing that's also quite sad. There are, unfortunately, teacher shortages all over the United States right now. I'm not sure if that's happening where you are, but this is sometimes causing it to be that when the pandemic was pretty terrible for schools, actually. And because of the pandemic, it might have caused in your area that schools that might have been participating before might even have started pulling back because of the difficulty of finding people to do that. Oh, neat. Student. Is a student wants to coach middle school MATHCOUNTS team. Wonderful. And I see that people are also in the situation where there was such a thing in the past before the pandemic, and now you're trying to resuscitate it. Fantastic. And I should say, actually, the inspiration for why I wanted to do this talk is because I heard that the statistics for how many people were participating in these middle school math activities went down like a rock during the pandemic. And right now, all of us who are in this world of encouraging people to do more math, we're all trying to do as much as we can to bring it all back. And when I was talking to a friend of mine who is a math teacher, she commented that it is because, at least in her school, the reason why it's difficult to find somebody to be the coach is because they are actually already short-staffed after the pandemic. So I wanted to put this talk out early on in the entire season because this is the time when you want to start and make sure that your local school, middle school, even elementary. Some of you are pretty ambitious here. You can do that too. Or high school. You want to make sure that these places all have their math teams getting started in this season. And so I just wanted to put this event early enough on the calendar. Yes, and this is because I actually also monitor the statistics for who is registering for these kinds of competitions. And it would be a major loss for the United States, and actually really any country, anywhere, the whole world, if we suddenly have a large drop-off in the number of people who are doing math, extracurricular math in middle school. So maybe let me start now by just saying a little bit about myself. I'm starting now because this is now about 5 minutes after the hour. A little bit about myself. I am a mathematician. I officially am a math professor at Carnegie Mellon University, which is where I just taught a class this afternoon. I'm also the national coach of the US International Math Olympiad team. And what that means is I coach students. And what coach students means is that students teach me stuff. So those are the kind of students that I teach. And I said that right now because I want to emphasize, if any parents are worried, what's it like to go into a room with some super genius younger people who know all kinds of things? It's fine. I do it all the time. And once you get the approach where what you're trying to do is you're trying to facilitate, you're trying to help them grow, then it doesn't matter that you're not the smartest person in the room. Every time I go to coach the US International Math Olympiad team, I know walking in that door that I'm one of the dumbest guys in that entire room. And this is not an insult of any of you parents, okay? I'm sure some of you are brilliant as well at math, but I want to emphasize that it is not important to be better at math than everyone you're coaching in order to coach them. Ooh, people said something about stats. Maybe I'll say something about that later too. And oh, I love this too. Maria, you also said you want to know how to broaden the participation of girls and underrepresented minorities. I think this is also a really interesting topic. I'll make sure that we touch on this at some point. Because the way this talk is trying to be structured, I'm trying to structure this where I'll say a bunch of stuff for about 20 minutes. And then the rest of it I want to just use to flow with whatever questions and answers come naturally from this audience. That way it matches for exactly you. I see that you're all busy people, and so I want the talk to be as close to what you need as possible. Okay, so the thing about my introduction, yes, I've been coaching, I've been used to these students, and I myself also grew up in the United States. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and that experience going through American public schools, and then in middle school, suddenly having a coach who was a parent, who volunteered to coach at my school, changed my life. And so that's why it affected me, and through a lot of the rest of the things that I did, I wanted to also give back and help other people, in some sense returning that favor. With that, I'm going to just flip in and show the way that I'll show my slides a little bit. For me, slides just means replacing the background and then continuing to talk. But so let's go back to here. Yes, and I can talk about a lot of these topics that come with these questions that are coming, like math learning, programming learning. We'll get there. But the first thing I want to do is, what is a math competition anyway? So a math competition is a very mysterious kind of activity where a bunch of people come together to do math. And at the beginning you might think, my gosh, what is this? Just a bunch of students. Is it painful? What does it feel like? Well, actually, interestingly enough, it feels like a community. So the interesting thing is, for people who might be interested, might be curious about putting their life towards math, science, academics, unfortunately, sometimes where they're growing up, it's just not automatically cool to be doing math and science. And that's just the nature of how the world is. Well, what these math competitions do is they give you a chance to discover that you're not alone. In fact, if you're curious about doing math and science, there are lots more with you. And these math competitions come in many different forms. I'll talk about some of the big national ones, but I also just put this random picture up here. This is a picture from the Harvard-MIT Math Tournament, which means that Harvard and MIT undergraduate students, college students, organized a contest for high school and some middle school students. And this is just a picture from the inside of MIT's, in the middle of their infinite corridor, if you know what I'm talking about. But this is one of the alcoves, one of the big atriums that comes off of the infinite corridor. But in any case, I'm just showing that this is what happens. On an early morning, suddenly a whole lot of people come together to do math. This is the informal style. Informal style, in my opinion, is wonderful too. And I'll share with you a whole bunch of ways that you can go and attend these things. These things let people see face to face that there are other people crazy about math. Or at least curious about math. Well, of course, there are also much more formal things. This thing here looks like a game show. And that's because this is the final round of the National MATHCOUNTS competition from a few years ago. And it really did look like a game show. And what they tried to do is they tried to make it so that it could look like mathematics is as much of a spectator sport as any other sport you'd see on ESPN. And I believe they streamed this on ESPN3 as well. but this was the MATHCOUNTS national competition. And these kinds of competitions, the interesting thing about this is, okay, competitions. Does everyone want to do competitions? Actually, that's not automatic. I don't even think that's obvious at all, that everyone loves to do competitions. And I'll be the first one to say that my take on competitions is I find them sometimes a little bit sad, or actually very sad. Because right here, what just happened was this was the final decision between the national champion of the entire country in math. One of them was extremely happy. The other was quite disappointed to be the second best person in math in the entire United States of America. So I'm just sharing that whenever we do these kinds of things, it's important to take it in good humor. So what I feel is that sometimes people get very caught up in competitions, and I think that competitions can be used to do wonderful things. And I myself love to throw myself against very, very hard challenges and competitions with this mental psychology that even if I don't win, it's okay. That was just part of the game. And I just want to say this right now because that can potentially help people approach the competition scene better. A competition is just an opportunity to throw yourself up against a hard challenge and even be able to rate yourself. That's always important. You want to be able to see that you're improving. And if we're talking about some very high ability students in the first place, well, you need something hard enough to fight against. But it's also important that you don't take it too seriously to the point that you say, oh man, I lost. So I just wanted to put that piece out there. And as I mentioned, I myself am an alumnus of this. Of course, I mentioned MATHCOUNTS a lot, but I'm also going to talk about other competitions that I have identified over the years as wonderful things to participate in. I will actually be highlighting the AMC competitions. Those are run by the Mathematical Association of America, as well as Math Kangaroo, as well as mathleague.org. And so these are all big systems that you can use to make it so that when you coach, there are actually activities for your students to do. Now, why coach? I want to emphasize that I want to tell a bit about the story of what happened when I was growing up. So when I was a middle school student, 6th grade, I actually hadn't known much about math competitions at all. In fact, what I thought math was doing arithmetic problems. And then when I went to middle school, there was one day, one very fateful day, when the school people told me, the teacher told me, there's some guy going to talk about a math competition. It's called MATHCOUNTS. It's a parent. Anyone who's interested, come to this room during lunch. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was a 6th grader. I didn't know anything. And I went into this room and, oh my gosh, there were all these 8th graders and 7th graders, a few 6th graders also. And a parent was explaining to people about this new competition thing that was at a school that his daughter was at before, but they had just moved into my school district, my school, and the father wanted to make it possible for his daughter to go and participate in this math competition. So the father, who was an engineer, he was not a professional educator by any means, but he was a very good-hearted engineer. He volunteered and said, I'll be the coach. And that's why this talk tonight, is about how anyone who wants to do what that wonderful person, Terry Gerhardt, did to my life and to lots of other people's lives, you can do it too. So here's what he did. He came in and he decided to voluntarily run a program that he did every weekend, every Sunday, at his office. It was his office, not the school. And for about 2.5 to 3 hours, we would all go there and do math problems, and we would also eat pizza. That was a very important ingredient, by the way. I want to emphasize this again. Pizza. Somehow, for middle school students, the pizza is a major piece of the entire experience, and it also creates a camaraderie, and it inserts a wonderful free time in the middle where people make friends. The father didn't know what he was doing, in the sense that he did know what he was doing. He didn't know what he would create. I just put a list here. I was just curious right before this talk. What are those people doing now? Those kids in this random middle school, public middle school in Madison, Wisconsin. School was called Thomas Jefferson Middle School. I looked at what everyone's doing now. This was a small group of people that he brought together for about 2.5 to 3 hours of math with pizza every Sunday. I looked at what people are doing now. There are 3 professors, 2 people founded startup companies, there are at least 2 lawyers, there are at least 2 doctors. I stopped looking after a while. An architect. And this is not to say that everyone needs to have a professional career by any means. Actually, I respect people who choose to do anything interesting that they find interesting with their life. But I know that for a lot of people who are on this kind of a call, maybe you're thinking about careers. This kind of an outcome for just a bunch of students from a random middle school in a middle of nowhere city, Madison, Wisconsin, that's a pretty good record. And what I want to say is that the magic of what he did is he just made it possible for our middle schools, 10-ish math and science curious people to come together every single Sunday, get to know each other, be motivated, and decide that we might want to spend our lives going further in this direction. Yes, student has already asked, should I buy the middle schoolers pizza every practice? The answer is yes. You look like you're a student. You should try to get funding for it somehow because you're a student. And I don't know where you can get that from. Sometimes the way people do it is they just the parents all chip in a little bit. But I want to emphasize that's a very important piece. But this thing I put here just because in case any parents are wondering, what can this make? This is what it can make. And also, I want to put another thing. Sometimes people are worried about sharing the secrets, right? Sometimes people are saying, well, I can coach my own kid, then my kid can win. I want to emphasize that's the wrong strategy. Having your kid win and be the best in your school is not as good as having the entire school bring together a bunch of people. Your kid might not be the best in your school anymore, but they will go so much farther. And in real life, who cares what school you came from? What matters in the end is just what can you do. And so I just want to emphasize that's what I would highly recommend that everyone does. If you're thinking of how to spread your time, do you really want to spend it teaching your own kid or spend it teaching other people? I'll give you a second tip. I never teach my own kid. I only teach other people's kids. If you have middle school and high school students, maybe you understand why this strategy might be useful. Actually, I like to call it the bank shot. What I do is I teach the kids that my kids hang out with. Maybe you then understand the logic of this. But the point is, once you go to middle school and high school, a lot of students are actually just watching other people. So as long as you can bring a whole bunch of people together and then get them interested in you, that's, in my opinion, that's the most effective way to get through to a teenager. So that's what I'll comment there. I'll make a lot more comments about how to make this practical too. First of all, this was a repeat announcement of the pizza is very important. Of course, you should not only choose pepperoni. It needs to have enough variety for people who are vegetarian as well. Actually, the quality of the pizza is also an important piece. I like people have said about the teen brain. By the way, it's because I've been working with high school students basically since I was a high school student. I graduated from high school in the year 2000. I went to high school in the late 1990s. And ever since then, I was helping to volunteer coach high school students. So I've been watching high school students for 2 decades, back from before cell phones to only cell phones. Just kidding. But anyway, what I mean is that when you look at teenagers, then you understand the long-term game is totally different from what you think you see when you look at 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds, you ask them to do something, and I guess they kind of do that. Yeah, elementary school kids might want candies. That's true. That's true. So if you're going to do this for elementary school, basically figure out what they want. Figure out what makes them happy, and then go for it. Okay, so that's the pizza. Now let me say what you could do, because I promised that this thing would actually be practical, right? It's not just a bunch of why you'd want to do it. Here's all you have to do. It's actually not rocket science. So I suggest a 2.5-hour schedule. This is based on just thinking of what works. If you don't have this time, I will also tell you how you can compress this into 1.5 hours. But the 2.5 hours actually gives you enough pizza time. And the other reason you need enough pizza time is because the delivery guy can be late. So just keep that in mind. The delivery of the pizza, it adds a variable inside all of this. And oh yes, the other thing we learned back from middle school when I was doing it, if you hold your practice on Super Bowl Sunday, the delivery guy will be late. So just keep that in mind. All right, well, so here's how I think it works. So first of all, whenever you run any event which has people driving there, I want to emphasize, if you can do this in person, that's the way to go, because otherwise the pizza, as you feed it through your Zoom, will destroy your computer. So don't do that. Right? So you use this, it has to be in person. Oh, can I not add? Maybe I can't add. 1 hour, 20 minutes. Thank you. Brilliant. I love it. Thanks, guys. So what you have just showed is that I'm not very good at arithmetic. But thanks. This shows that the audience is amazing at arithmetic and also at math. So good. But so I recommend about 10 minutes at the beginning, settle in, try to find some icebreaker or something. I've discovered, thanks Maria, I just can't subtract. But so over here, this settle in, come up with some fun thing for people to debate on. Actually, sometimes people like to chat. The most recent thing that I saw some people chatting about was debating on whether there were more doors or more wheels in the world. That can keep people busy for a while. Other things that people like to just chat about, things like do you like pineapples on pizza? Just something to get people talking, right? Just have something friendly. You can come up with some icebreaker every single time. Then that's like a relatively easy thing to do. And if you can't come up with something, just let them hang out, because they'll be happy just to have a free time to decompress. But then after that, be actually on time with starting 10 minutes after, so that everyone has an expectation that if they come late, it will be late. So I put 40 minutes here because a lot of these middle school math competitions have a 40-minute time limit. Do I suggest more than one parent manage the session? I suggest that you only need one per session. If you want to spread the load, then you can take turns, and that's great. You do not need two, because actually what you really need, if you want to add more people, get a high school student, one of your alums. That's actually magic. And then what you'll find out is the high school student works magic. Okay, yes. And actually, you don't need more parents. If you bring more high school students, it's just going to be amazing. So the secret is basically peer and near peer. Right. So then 40 minutes is because that's about the time of one of these rounds, or maybe you can do a bunch of different rounds. It could be 45. You can flex this. Basically, in the first hour, you're doing problems. Doing problems means that the students themselves are doing problems without interruption and, without discussion, unless they're actually doing a team round. There are team rounds in some of these math competitions. Sometimes you're intentionally having them discuss, but that's just like actually doing the problems. Oh, neat. Somebody has asked, would this work if it was held in the school? So I actually used to volunteer at my kids' middle school. And there was a time when they actually let us do it in the school. And I was doing it in the school on the weekends. So I don't know the logistics of every school. Some schools are more strict, some are less strict. And so you'd have to look at your school. But in the end, I actually ended up doing it in my workplace. It's a university, but I ended up just using my workplace because it was more convenient for me. And that was what the parent in my school when I was growing up did as well. Okay, so then after that, I just put this pizza time, put enough time for this. You need enough time for people to get the food, to eat the food, to chit-chat. The making of friends is magic. You see, what happens when you get a bunch of middle school students, and you as the parent, what you want to do is you want to also watch that period and use that period to try to make sure everyone feels welcome. There was this comment earlier about underrepresented people in these math competitions. What I always look at is I try to see during those free times, do people feel included? And that's where I, or any of the younger assistants who happen to be there, what you want to do is you want to make sure they feel included. And you might even want to give little private nudges to individual people one-on-one who are already in the in-group to intentionally pull in the other people. I often assess the health of a team or a community based on whether it does have diversity. And the diversity is actually important in many ways. It makes it way more fun for the people who are there, actually. Way more fun. Oh, what is the range for number of kids for a group? So my school where I was doing it, it was about 10 people. Some schools are more. I know that some schools even have 50 people. Those schools are often the ones that win the state championship. I've just noticed that correlation. Yes, I was traveling around the country giving math talks all summer. When I went to State College, Pennsylvania, 100 people showed up for the talk. State College is not a big city. State College is tiny. And that's because the coach that was there had this huge network of students. Then I went to Cleveland, Ohio, and at my public outdoor math talk at some random park far out of the city, a school bus was there because the math coach of one of the schools, the one which won the Ohio State Championship, was there. And she had brought she also had some, well, I don't know how many she brought, but she has 50 students doing it. At some point, I continued on. I went to Indianapolis, and then suddenly there were another 100 people there because the coach, Trent Tormolen, also somehow runs a massive program. But what I've noticed is that, yes, some people have lots, but if you have 10, that's still valuable. 8, valuable. If you have less than 8, convince more people to join. Do you mix elementary and middle school? So, you see, what I would recommend here is if you're going to do something, you are one person, maybe you aim for something that you want to hit, and then get some parents to help other age groups if you want. But one parent who has a full-time job or is busy with other kinds of things anyway, maybe you don't have the time to go and manage the entire program for the whole school. Like all the different ages. But the elementary school students, if there are some advanced elementary school students, sure, bring them in. When we were in all of these practices when I was young, they brought my younger brother in. He's a super genius. I'm the dumb one. My brother is real smart. And so he was the one who came in and he would beat everyone else. Well, so, but then this the little kid. That also helps to keep everyone humble, you know, when this little elementary school kid comes in and, and it's like super, super good. Jen, can we mix students from different schools? If you want to. Actually, that's a great question. Some people think of this like, okay, we want to win. You know, I coached the national math team, and one of the things I added to the coaching of the US national math team was intentionally inviting the students from the top 10 other countries in the world to come join us for free. People thought I was crazy, and the other countries couldn't believe it. Like, what are you doing? You're going to coach our students for free, and then we'll beat you. I said, that's fine, doesn't matter. We're going to have some fun. Because the whole point is to inspire people to want to do this, and if you bring other people together, go for it. So it's up to you. I'd say that's up to you. You'd have to negotiate that with the other school, probably. Okay, and then this last part. This is very important. Notice it does not say that you're explaining how to do the problems. It says students explain the solutions to each other. This is important. Let me tell you how the coach did it when I was doing it, when I was a student. What he would do is after the pizza, we'd sit down, and he had a whiteboard in his office. It was a conference room. And then he would say, okay, question number 1. Anyone have a guess for what the answer is? And, you know, people would say what they thought was the answer. At some point, we'd figure out what the right answer was because he would tell us. And then he would say, aha, so you think you know how to do it? Who thinks they know how to do it? Come to the whiteboard and explain. And this is great. So like coaches who don't consider themselves math whiz, how can you lead? This is exactly what I'm saying now, right? Because you probably have other kinds of skills too. You do have other kinds of skills too. And so what he did is he said, okay, great, so that's the answer. Now, who wants to try to explain? And the person will come to explain. And the person would explain on the whiteboard. And as the person's explaining, he would say, no, don't explain to me. Don't explain to the coach. Explain to everyone else. And everyone else, if you have any questions at all, ask the questions until you understand. And then after the explanation is done, then the coach would ask everyone, does everyone understand? And if the answer was no, he would say, can you maybe try explaining a bit more clearly? And if it turns out that it wasn't explainable in a way that people understand, then he would say very politely, well then maybe it might be that you also don't completely understand how to solve the problem either. It's actually important to be able to explain it. He emphasized, when I was in 6th grade, I was hearing this all the time, if you can't explain to another person how to solve the problem, you actually haven't solved the problem. This is sort of what he said. And by the way, all of you, it doesn't matter whether you're a math whiz or not. If somebody's explaining something, you would probably be able to understand a lot of that explanation as well. And that's also a benchmark of, you know, does it seem like it's explained in a way for a person who's sitting there listening to understand? But even if you really, really don't do math, you can judge that based on whether other people understand. And so what my coach did is he built this very respectful environment by which we all actively tried to explain things in ways that other people understand. We were not this environment of, yes, I can do all the problems, blah, 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 now I look very smart, you guys are all dumb. No, that doesn't work. He was actually intentionally building this to be a collaborative and nice community where you help. And then the fun thing is after that was done, the first question is explained, the person would sit down and he would say, does anyone else have a different way of doing the question? And then he would invite the next person to come up. So then we would just, oh, sorry, I went on screensaver. He would just go and have people showing these different ways of doing problems. And we would actually be celebrating the fact that there are different ways of doing any question. Aha! So we're going to get to this now in a moment about how to actually execute this on the logistics side, on the registration side, okay? We'll get to that too, Cesar, just a second. So now back to this thing I was just saying, this entire period is one where you are the game show host. This is actually how I always think of it whenever I'm doing it, and anyone else that I'm advising. I say, your job is the game show host. You keep the energy up, you keep people paying attention, you give feedback on the presentation. And eventually everyone actually respects you for your skill as that host. I mean, if you watch a TV show, there are all of these TV hosts who end up interviewing and having on their show people with skills that they do not have. And somehow we still respect the person who's the host. If you want a practical tip on how to be an even more effective host, I'll give you an off-the-wall suggestion. Take improv comedy classes. This is what I did. I did this much later in my life after I was already coaching, but the improv comedy classes I took to actually help me with everything in life, not just coaching, not just teaching. And the improv comedy teaches you how to go into any situation and adapt and make it look like it was natural. Magically, you can go into any place and it's fine even if you're not the expert. And this thing would actually change your ability to do things, even with your job or with other communications, or even convincing the PTA to do something. And improv comedy classes are generally very affordable. I was just talking to a Carnegie Mellon student this afternoon. He came up to me and said, I took your advice. He's a first-year student. He said, I'm taking the improv comedy classes in the local theater. That's like off campus. Because I told all of our students too, take the improv comedy classes just to learn how to communicate. All right, so that's what I would give the advice. You see, you don't have to be a math whiz, but it does help to have some of this personality that you can also learn. Or you can be a math whiz, or you can have both. Anything is fine. All right, but this works, and then by the end of this, you're basically coming up towards dismissal, and then parents are coming there. Practical thing to know, sometimes parents are delayed, so yeah, you might need to be aware that sometimes you'll have a student that stays a little bit after. Oh, I know that some people do these at houses too. Some people do these just at someone's home. And actually, I remember, I did it at someone's home for a lot of the time when I was coaching the local middle school math team that my kids go to here in Pittsburgh. So it's just wherever you can find the space. That's all. All right. Now, things to register for and things that you can participate in. The beautiful thing is that there are many things. So when I was doing this, there was only one event that my school did, which was MATHCOUNTS. And so you have everyone just coming, going, and there's one meet. It's more fun when there are more meets, because then it just feels like the calendar is rich. And so the things that I want to put here are, there are a bunch of wonderful national contests that I've gotten to know fairly well that I'm very happy to recommend. Mathleague.org does the service of having 6 contests a year, 1 a month. Great! For you, you're looking for something for your students to do. Here is something for them to do, and make sure that when they're doing it, they don't just compare scores and say who's smarter than who. I don't ever want to see students comparing scores. I don't think that's interesting. Also, whenever I'm choosing teams, I tell everyone up front, I don't care whether you're on the team or not. Official team. Some of these have an official team. I don't care whether you're on the team or not. I still care about you. And I make sure I carry through with that. So that's also what makes everyone feel welcome to be in this. AMC 8, this is something people usually take in their schools, and that happens to be in January, and it happens to be similar kinds of problems. Oh, Andrew Lin, what about the other AMCs? Well, the other AMCs are great too. You should do those too. Those happen to be in January, but they can be harder. The AMC 10 is a high school contest. I would recommend doing it if you feel more advanced, but then definitely do it if you... Oh, sorry, it's usually in November. It's usually November. I think this year is November. Yeah, it's probably not December. December would be a bad choice, just given things that happen in December. So I believe it's November this year. And indeed, that would also be good to do if you happen to have students that are a bit more advanced, is what I'd say. There's also MATHCOUNTS, which is in February. But MATHCOUNTS, by the way, also has a school round. That's where you select your official team. To me, that's the most depressing part. Thanks, Maria, for commenting. So that is AMC 10 and 12 are in November. And you can do both the AMC 8 and the AMC 10. Those are fine. And then there's also something called Math Kangaroo, which I didn't know much about when I was younger, but very recently I've gotten to know the problems much better. These are genius. These Math Kangaroo problems are so different from the other math contest ones. They have a much heavier focus on logic, which I think is also beautiful because it's refreshing to see for me to see questions that I cannot solve quickly. I mean, that I cannot already recognize, oh, it's that kind. I love the questions where I have to say, well, how would you do this? And somehow they are able to come up with these questions, which is wonderful. Okay, let me continue. So now there are also regional contests. I just wanted to throw this out here too. Oh, is there a possible syllabus by contest? So they are basically all comparable. And I also realized that in the way that this Zoom is going, let me just lift my chat a little bit. That way it'll be a little bit easier to see because some people's Zoom message bar keeps coming up. Okay, so the question is there a possible syllabus by contest? They're all about the same. So a lot of these contests are just asking the same kinds of things which are outside of the typical middle school math curriculum, but are really interesting. They involve things like, of course, some algebra, some geometry, but also some very clever ways of counting. That's called combinatorics. And some interesting things about when you divide numbers by other numbers, what the remainders are like. That's called number theory. Okay. There are also other contests. I put this thing out here because if you happen to live in some part of the country which is near one of these, well, you have another opportunity to go to a real in-person one. Or if you want to go a little bit longer, like drive or fly, you can also. These are the ones coming up. I actually have a mailing list which I run, and if you want to register for it, it's just on my website. You can find this, PoShenLoh.com. Go to the bottom, you'll find some way to keep in contact, which has a mailing list. Every 2 weeks, actually, on this mailing list, we send out an update of here are some upcoming contests on our radar, based on what we have understood to be happening in the US. The unique thing about these is that these are all run by students. So the previous contests I mentioned, those are run by professionals, and these are students. Student contests are also great. And so this is just a layout of some of these. This is at Phillips Andover Academy. This is in New Jersey. Then, of course, on the West Coast, there's something in Berkeley. This one actually is for high school students primarily. I'll make that comment there. And then the Harvard MIT Math Tournament this year will be at Harvard. That happens to be a bit more towards the high school side. Miami has a competition for middle school students as well coming up in December. But I just put this here because if you're interested, if you join the mailing list, we'll keep sending updates. And then you'll see whenever there's something online as well as offline. Now, suppose that you need to find the problems. Remember, the layout of how you would run this event is that you have to have students working on problems. Where will you find them? I personally really enjoy the MATHCOUNTS problems. The MATHCOUNTS problems I find to have a very large variation of area that they cover, as well as a lot of gradation of difficulty, because MATHCOUNTS has multiple levels in the competition system, from school level to city level to state level to national. And because of the varied levels, you can always find something that's hard enough or approachable enough. If you have a student who finds everything too easy, they can always play with the national questions, and those are hard. Those are hard. And so that's why I think that's interesting. This is just recommendation, that's just my personal recommendation. The way to find them, by the way, you can't get them for free. If you find them for free, that's a copyright violation. Please do not use those. And just buy them from their website. They don't cost a lot. MATHCOUNTS is a nonprofit organization. I think it's fine to support them. The AMC problems, those are actually all available. You can search on them online. That is actually legal. The ones you can find out there are legal out there. So feel free to use those too. The difference between these and those is that the AMC problems are multiple choice. And I personally enjoy letting students work on problems which are not multiple choice. This is just my own style. I prefer when middle school students are thinking about problems that there's a problem and there's a blank and they don't have the A, B, C, D, E to figure out what the answer is. So I'll just say that's the difference, although they're also very good. And thanks, Andrew Lin, for sharing a link. You can actually find these things on Google. And they're good too. They're good too. Don't get me wrong. I might actually even recommend doing them where you block the answer choices, because you don't need the answer choices. The only reason there are answer choices is to make it faster for grading. Yeah, actually, I want to emphasize the problem quality of AMCs is also good. And of course, Math Kangaroo, also excellent. And those actually are also for sale on their website. I have looked at those problems. I think they're amazing. And so I would say these are some sources from which you can find them. You might want to even try alternating through them. And that way you give your students some variety of experience. Somebody asked about registrations. So this is where you might need to coordinate with your schools too. And that's why I wanted to put this whole thing out here now. Because anytime you need to do something with schools or PTAs, you have an extended period of time that it takes to go and have those meetings. So there are multiple deadlines that I've listed. I looked this up just now. MATHCOUNTS registration deadline I think it's early bird pricing, so it's a discounted registration rate, November 1st, and December 15th, I think, is their main registration date. The website says something about late registration, but I think it's best not to go into the late registration side. Regardless, though, this is pretty soon. And so a lot of times the school has to make some decision. And I would advise, if the school has a budget shortfall, it doesn't actually cost that much to register for these contests. I don't actually know the numbers off the top of my head, but my guess is that for any student to register, it's at most $25-ish per student. Probably a lot less. Actually, I know the AMC is a lot less. Oh, Maria has said $30 a student. Still close enough, the same ballpark. The reason I say it's reasonable is because once your kids go to high school, then they take AP exams like crazy. And the AP exams cost nearly $100 each. So basically, this is much more economical than a lot of the other things that are out there. And yes, Dale, thanks for asking. Do these contests allow homeschoolers to register? I know that MATHCOUNTS has something for it. I know that AMC, people can go and take the contest at a local test center, like a university or another school. That's also okay. And Math Kangaroo, you take them at exam centers. So you can also do that. You either register your exam center, like a school, or you go to another one. You go to a nearby one. So all of this is possible. But I'm putting all this here because it's good if you just go to the website and go and see, so this is what it costs. Can we talk to the school to see if the school will register? And especially if you find out that the school used to do it but doesn't anymore, this is a very important time to get in and start discussing, what can we do? What is the real problem? Is the problem personnel? If it's personnel, now you have coaching in a box. You can do it. A team of parents can put this thing together. You can even take turns week after week. Or is the situation financial? But the financial, it's $30 a person. That's actually not crazy for the opportunity that this creates. So I recommend that you are aware of these deadlines and already start doing something if possible. And it's best if you do get the school to be on board with this too, because what the school will help you do towards the discussion about diversity, what the school will help you do is it will actually help you reach out to more students. Because if you just reach out to the people your friends, your kids know, that will be a very select group of people which are similar to each other. But if you let the school advertise it, you will find people who come out of the woodwork. For Math Kangaroo, can you register as an individual? I believe it is actually an individual competition that you register for at a local center. So the question is just, where are the centers? And actually what we'll be doing on the mailing list is actually every single, not every single, but in the upcoming editions, we'll actually be giving more details of what to do practically to join each of these things. We just want to make it so it's as easy as possible. Right. So actually, before I go to the last thing, I'll say there are also other things that you can do, other resources. If you're interested in watching discussions, watching expositions of people solving problems, that was this last thing that I just flashed up here. So some of you know that we are running a lot of live streams on YouTube, and we actually run a lot of our own resources. This is on our live Daily Challenge Live. This is the thing that I run. But if you join every other Friday, we actually have a Math Kangaroo live solve where the explanations look like this. What we're using is we're using the format that we feel most captivates students, middle school students, to want to learn mathematics. And of course, we rely on brilliant high school students to be the ones who get people very interested. So we have all of these things running. This runs every other week. And of course, if you're interested, there's actually a lot of other things that we do as well. This is all from our live courses. But it's not important that you only come through us. There are lots and lots of different ways in order to pick up these skills. And the main purpose of this talk is to go into that. With that, I want to use the rest of the time to do any Q&A, because I just took too long talking. Of course, I was also answering questions that came along the way. What do we have here? Oh, I see some questions already. How do you suggest the variation in practice? Contest versus select questions. And how many for each different contest? See, I think it's useful to actually just be using the problems that come in there. The contest already has a bag of problems. Those are already interesting. You don't have to do the selection yourself. I actually never do that, even myself. I don't select problems for people. I just say, let's do them, and let's get very creative about solving them. And when my students get more experienced, I say, well, we will intentionally do the problems in backwards order. The questions usually go from easy to hard. So then we say we're going to do backwards order because we want to make sure you got some time to think about these hardest questions. And so you can do that mixing up. But I don't think it's really important. Well, one thing I really don't like, don't just say we're going to do a lesson and we're just going to do Pythagorean theorem problems. That takes all the fun out of it. The fun of the math contest experience is that you see something you never knew how to do and you think about how to do it. Don't systematize it. Don't turn it into something where you're just trying to drill people on this skill, that skill, that skill. Sure, that might help them win the contest, but that takes away the ability for the person to really practice thinking of new ideas. Math circle material, those are also great. If you want to use those too, you can use those too. I would just say, you sound like you already know a lot of things, a lot of background about mathematics. Really, any problems that students can work on are good. I mean, what I do sometimes with my middle school students when I was volunteering, what I did with my middle school students when I was volunteering in the local middle school was during the off season, we'd work on the high school AIME problems. That's the second level of high school math competitions. They're insanely hard. The middle school kids would be thinking about the same problem for half an hour, and I would just go around giving tips. The only important thing is that they are actually themselves working on something, and the things I suggested are the easiest ones to take out of a bag and go. Because that's what the coach did when I was a student. It was easy. We're going to do the 1995 problems. Oh, sorry, that shows what year I grew up. But anyway, you do the 2000 and what year now? 2020 problems and the 2019 problems, right? You can just go through and it's easy. You just pull them up, let's go. And of course, After a while, the best thing is after you've done this for a while, you get a high school student. What I mean is you get an 8th grader who finishes, so loved the experience that they come back as a 9th grader and suddenly you got a coach. You got somebody who's got all of this stuff inside them and they're really, really happy to volunteer. All right, so something else I'd watched, somebody was asking about math learning and programming learning. I think that if you learn the math, you automatically build the foundation for a lot of programming. So that's just how I feel. At an early age, building this math is really, really useful. Programming itself, as you can see, I also love programming. Like the system we're using right now where the chat is thrown on screen, I was involved. I was the one who programmed most of that. A lot of the work that I do, like all of our live courses too, like a lot of the work that I do relies on programming. But I learned the programming by just trying to make something practical and using the math background I had to figure out how to do it. Okay, from my experiences, what challenges do I face in the coaching sessions? The biggest challenge is how to inspire the students to all really be high energy. So my job is the cheerleader, the game show host, and also making sure it's inclusive. Because if I see somebody who feels uncomfortable, my job is to make sure they feel comfortable. If they say one idea, I'm going to jump in and be like, yes, that was a terrific idea, Jenny. I'm so glad that you said that. I think that's our job. What we are trying to do is we're trying to make it so it's clear that by suggesting an idea, you are valued. And it is not just that the one person who keeps answering every question is the valued person. We need to make that clear. And oftentimes if someone's answering too many questions, I say, it's great, I know that you know. How about we give other people a chance to? Okay, if we buy the questions, do they come with detailed solutions? That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. They might, depends on which ones they are. But I'd also say that alone might not be the most important thing, because it turns out that if you get 10 middle school kids who are all pretty keen on this into a room, they can basically solve almost all of them. And if they can't, during the pickup time, when their parents come in, someone's mom or dad might be like, oh, that was the one we can't solve, and the moms and dads start playing. What I'm trying to say is like, see, here's how I see it. There's the group intelligence of the 10 middle school kids, which is already very high. And then the backup plan is during the pickup, you just throw it out, and some moms or dads who are interested in trying to do it, someone will solve it. And if they can't solve it, you can just probably search internet. There might be somebody who has tried to think about this before. But usually, in my experience, a lot of things do get resolved. Okay. Do you have any comments on Academy of Problem Solving? I mean, I think that they have done a lot of good things. This is AOPS. They've done a lot of good things for the world, and I happen to know their founder very well. So I think that a lot of people are in this space who are providing lots and lots of different resources, and they definitely are also providing good resources in this space. Oh, I love it. So Sheris has said Kangaroo does a parent test for the eager parents too. Yes. That's always, like, there are always going to be eager parents who want to try. Okay, any other questions? As you can see, as the questions are coming in, I'm just going to hit them here. If you happen to be watching through YouTube, I'm not seeing your comments. Facebook, I'm not seeing your comments. But if you go to live.poshenloh.com/show, you can type comments that will come into this screen. Okay, is this only suitable for contests, not suitable for doing such learning format topic by topic like geometry, trigonometry, etc.? Yeah, so I actually think that the beauty of this particular kind of experience is the not topic by topic. I think that topic by topic is already happening at school. So that school math is teaching you how to have a very steady background where when you see this kind of question, you know how to do it. That kind of question, you know how to do it. These things, these 2.5-hour sessions, they teach you how to handle, oh, I've never seen that before. Now what do I do? Which is really useful in real life. That's actually, to me, the takeaway. If you want to think about what is the most useful thing you get from math, it is to figure out the new ideas. And so it is really useful that the questions really come from everywhere. I also find that it makes it feel very fresh for the students, because then the students are always seeing that, oh wow, it's this and that and that. It's interesting. Size of the group. Again, I think that 10 is already doable. 20 might be a bit much. You probably won't end up with 20 unless you happen to have a gigantic school, just from the way most scales are. But it might be like 10 to 20. You could do that, or you could even do 6, 7. That's just that's up to you to try to manage the interpersonal social piece. Okay. Other questions? Oh, Daniel, yes. 3 principles of math learning. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You watched one of my Dale Li. You watched some of my Principles, yes. So you watched the talk where I said here are three very important things for us to build in our students in middle school. I love that you remember the first one, which is to care about others. That is what I think is very important, and I think that as a coach, you can inspire people to care about others too. That's very important. And then the second one I said was love hard math, and that's what this entire teaching style is trying to do. And then the third one was to stay curious, which is to keep open-minded to other things that you could learn. And those were the three principles I tried to share earlier. Okay. Yeah, I said 10 and up is great. You want to get a bunch of people in there. And so if you have less than 10, find ways to recruit more people. How do you suggest to set expectations with parents? What kids gain and what the parents want for the kids to gain may be slightly different. Yeah. So what I'd say is that it's important for you to set expectations where the parents aren't going to just try to have their kids try to win. The most difficult thing is when parents are deciding that the definition of success is a relative rank where you try to win, because you just can't guarantee that. Winning means that you've beaten other people. But if everyone was using the best strategy, then it's actually luck, right? So you don't want to define success based on whether people win or not. Instead, what I recommend is that you define success based on whether the kids are like really enthusiastic to keep doing this and to keep doing hard problems. As the coach, what you should see is when they seem to be pretty good at doing problems, ratchet up the difficulty. That's why it's useful to have problems at different difficulty levels. You're like, yes, they seem to be able to do these. Let's keep challenging. The fun thing is to be able to make kids very comfortable working on things where they probably won't succeed right away. In fact, that's beautiful because you get used to that. And as you get used to working on hard things, you just love working on hard things. So I'd say that if you can build an environment where the kids are always being challenged, love the challenge, have friends and healthy relationships, they're going to go very, very far. And if the parent somehow really, really wants to focus on winning some contest and they want to have their kids do some extra practice at home, that's really their choice. But I think it's actually quite unhealthy when the parent, I've heard parents before tell their kids, you're trying to get into the top 10. And the way I think about it is there's more than 10 parents who just said that to their kid before the contest. Whenever I take my kids to a contest, I don't actually care about the end result. I don't watch necessarily, a lot of times I don't watch the awards ceremony. To this day, I still don't know my kids' scores on the AMCs. It's not I don't care. But we'll go to the math contest and I'll always ask them, did you make any new friends? And do you have a way to stay in touch? Those are my two questions on every event. And by the way, I gave you a list of the regional contests. We go to them. I mean, I'm going to take my youngest kid to this math contest in New Jersey. We're gonna fly there. That's an outing. That's me and her. And we'll just go there, and I don't care how she does. In fact, she's just gonna go there and play and make some friends. That's the point. And then I think the next month I'm taking my older two kids to the contest in Berkeley. Again, they're gonna go, make some friends. Who wins, who loses, doesn't matter. The important thing was to go and make the other contacts. And at this point, by the way, my oldest daughter is 16. She's in high school. She's already a junior in high school. And I can say that the network of friends she built from doing this kind of going to contests, not worrying about whether you win, but building the friends, this was essential. Because once you go to high school, it is essential to have that bunch of friends. Ooh, Ran Lin has asked, some kids usually skip steps when they present how they solve problems, and sometimes it seems they are not good at explaining. Maybe they just don't think in a similar way of most people. Should we encourage them to explain the details as clean as possible, or just let them present their solution in their ways? I would say take this as an opportunity to teach them empathy, which is called when they are explaining. Who are they explaining to? You? No. They're explaining to everyone else. The other people are the students in the math team. So what matters is whether or not those people get it or not. If your explanation does not have them get it, then use easier words, use easier steps. Ask them, where are you having difficulty? This is actually really useful for developing communication skills among math people. Okay, how do you deal with students with vastly different abilities? So on that one, what I would say is that the luxury you have when you run a math team is that most people are at least motivated. And if they're motivated, what I do is I just say, hey, let's just have them ask. What I mean is if someone is motivated and willing to listen, generally speaking, as long as they are qualified for it, qualified means actually knowing like 6th grade math to be able to play along with everyone else, they will be able to learn this stuff. The difficulty comes when there are people who are not motivated or are not listening. Then at that point you will have vastly different abilities. And then the thing we try to do is we try to get them interested in listening, or we might have to talk to them about this. And in the end, if that doesn't work out, it's not because their ability fundamentally was bad. It's just that they somehow weren't as engaged. And I've observed that when I teach in this way, I have initially people of different abilities, but pretty soon, since the whole thing is about problem solving, pretty soon they catch up. So that's helpful, unless they're just like too young for the thing altogether. Do you have a way to evaluate collaboration? For me, it's just, do people seem to be empathetic? Do they seem to, in the collaboration, does each person seem to have helped the other, I guess? If I see a team effort, I try to say, it's not that you need to show me who's good. I'm not going to give you any grades. I'm the coach. I don't grade you on anything. Actually, the people you want to impress, to make them think that you're a good person, are the people around you. But believe it or not, just being the guy or girl who answers everything fast is not the way to make the most friends. It just doesn't necessarily work that way. So then when you I guess set the goal slightly differently, hopefully people are actually more collaborative. But that's also the theme that we have to set. Like, we have to, as the adults or as the coaches, set the idea that we are trying to build something here where we're helping everybody and we're all trying to learn together, not just trying to beat other people. For younger kids, 5th and 6th, how would you go about distributing solutions to problems? For ones that did not get to try or do during the session, do you typically distribute written solutions the following week or meeting? I'm toying with the idea of making YouTube videos for trickier problems, since I'm not sure how often kids at this age are motivated to read written solutions. You are absolutely right, Shazar. Kids don't read written solutions. Unfortunately, it's not only now, even when people were a long time ago. People are not super inclined to read written solutions. The YouTube video idea is pretty good. I will say you have discovered, well, you've caused me to say something that I probably wasn't going to announce here yet, but we are actually probably going to be running regular AMC 8 live solves in the style that we do very soon. So you'll hear about that thing soon. But what I'm trying to say is that this thing that you're talking about, of video-based solutions that explain harder questions, that actually is going to exist pretty soon. And we're actually trying to do that at a very high quality. So hopefully that makes your life easier. You don't have to use it. Then at that point, it's not really that you have to distribute the solutions. Really what I try to do is I try to make it so that when people are at the practice, they are engaged and they are thinking. And then how much of it they do as homework, I actually don't really know. In fact, a lot of people won't do it as homework, right? Even if you ask them to. So when you distribute solutions, I think less important of distributing solutions, more important is just saying, hey, here are some problems. If you want to continue thinking about the ones after you went home, you're welcome to. And then I encourage them, if you see each other at school, if you can build a culture of ask somebody else, like, how did you do this one? Well, that might even make people have something to talk about at school. But no promise that that thing will definitely happen. So another question. As a coach, what is my preparation routine before the sessions? Be happy. Prepare to be the game show host, make sure that I can build a community, these kinds of things, and just show up and improvise and have fun. Make sure I printed, so other things. I keep a spreadsheet of this year's problems. I've done these problems, because if you start doing this, by the way, you might find out that you get hooked. You might think, I'm just going to do this for my kid. My daughter's in 8th grade, I'll just do it once. That's what my coach thought. I don't know if that's what he thought, but he started when his daughter was in 8th grade. He ended up doing it for a whole bunch of years, just because he thought it was interesting to watch all of these people. So it's important to be organized and to remember that on this date, I did these problems. On this date, I did these problems. Because if you find yourself continuing to do this, you'll eventually want to make sure that your students don't get repeated problems. So that's just where you should keep that organized and then print out all the problems and so on. Okay. If logistics is an issue, can you do online lessons? How to adapt the approach of doing online? Online will be significantly harder. It's because a lot of online things do not actually captivate kids' attention. I would warn you not to do that unless you have a lot of technology ready. Anyone who has taken our live classes or has watched the way that we do live streams know that we actually do a huge amount of technological effort to make it so that the middle school kid will watch. That level of investment is probably not worth it for you. I mean, we actually get specialized equipment to do all of this. We teach the people who are teaching how to be professionals at performing. We actually embed actresses, professional actresses, in our Zoom classes that are constant. Yeah, this is fun. This is actually, maybe some of you didn't know this. I run an entire online school where the way this works is we have high school students who are math geniuses learning how to perform and communicate. That changes their life. It also helps them ace their Harvard interview. So there's something really helping the high school students. Well, meanwhile, they're practicing, because you can't learn these skills just by watching the professionals. You got to practice. They practice this by live streaming Zoom sessions to groups of middle school kids and elementary school kids. And during those Zoom classes, it actually looks like the thing I just showed you. I mean, Okay, since that came up, they look like this. I mean, this is what we do when we want to go and teach math classes. It looks like this. And then they put this kind of thing up. And this is like drawing on the screen, you name it, everything. And during the time that they're teaching, there is actually also a professional actress in that Zoom room as one of these black boxes, constantly giving feedback to the high school student who's talking. It's a personality coach in real time. We teach them how to use hands, face, voice, tone of voice, everything. And so that's actually why our things end up looking the way that they do. But otherwise, if you don't do that, I actually do not think that online classes are effective at all. I know that during the pandemic, a lot of people just watched YouTube instead. And that's why when we decided to do it, we said we have to beat YouTube. And the only way to beat YouTube is to look at what middle school students are watching, copy all of that and bring it all to education, and put some professional drama people in the room to guide. Anyway, so now back to the in-person things. I do think in-person is magic, since you guys are all thinking about things in your own areas, so do them in person if you can. Okay. Yes, how to keep kids being focused in online math training. You gotta actually take the advice from the experts in in professional entertainment. What age do I think is too young for middle school math group? It's just about whether or not they're going to be mature enough to sit, think, and to get the feedback from you, which they might not be used to, which is like, it's great that you solved the problem, but please try to explain it to other people. Like, that was one of the beautiful things that my coach did, is to tell everyone, you have to be able to explain it to. He said this so many times. And he said the communication is actually as important as solving the problem in the first place. I might have missed one question. I'm just leaning in to take a look right here. No, I think we're good. So far seems okay. Yeah, right. So far it looks like I think I hit all the questions that are in here. If there's a question that I missed, please do just type it one more time, because then I'm sorry if I missed one. But otherwise, we basically got to 9 o'clock. And I know that a lot of the people here are busy. And so since people are busy, we said that we'd finish at 9. So with that, it looks like I don't see any more questions coming in. So I'll say thank you to everybody for being interested in wanting to do something like this. I think that if all over the country these kinds of things pop up, you will change the lives of dozens of kids all over. And as you can see, the main ingredient is pizza. Good luck. Take care.